For a number of years, British schools have accommodated the increasing cultural diversity of their pupils. However, the question still continues to be asked, why are black boys underachieving? And is it the education system that's at fault? We've brought together a panel of experts to discuss the situation. Gilroy Brown, who is studying why African Caribbean boys are underachieving. Henroy Green, Public Relations Director for the National Black Boys Can Association. Dr. Lorna Cork, published author on raising African Caribbean achievement. And Chris Smith, a primary head teacher in one of the toughest areas of Birmingham. How much do you think black boys are to blame?
In terms of how much black boys are to blame for the issues affecting them today, I would say that with this issue, there's no single cause and therefore no single solution. I think the cause is created by a number of instances. It's partly to do with attitudes of the young people, as well as historically how a society has discriminated against young people, and young people in particular ethnic groups. I think it's to do with pressures that actually face young people on a day-to-day basis, peer group pressure, which we've all been through in our respective lives. But of course, I think today, a 15 and 16-year-old boy, be they black, white, or whatever, living in the inner city is facing some tremendous odds we couldn't even dream of. No strategic strategy for really raising aspirations for young people and finding them something to do that's purposeful.
I think one of the key things, particularly with black boys, is about understanding the culture of the black community. I'll give you a for instance. You're telling off a group of young people, and you typical. And I remember when I was at school, where a teacher said, "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Well, culturally, I wouldn't look at an adult when they were telling me off, because it was part of my culture. You just wouldn't do it. And so the black kids may decide, actually, they're not going to look at the teacher when they talk to them. That's then interpreted as insolence. That then escalates the issue. So it's simple little things about understanding the culture. Whatever happens, whatever the problems are, we need to overcome them. Yeah, they're still there. You're not going to win all the time, but try to win. Otherwise you may as well just lock the gates and go home.
We are aware that there's racism, we're aware of all these things in the environment, but we've got to find ways of circumventing them, addressing them, and working together with the schools, with other organisations, perhaps other community groups as well, to try and work with that mutual goal in mind, which is making sure that our young people achieve.
Pressures are outside of the children, and our children have got to be strong, and they've got to be stronger than we were at a similar age in order to resist the negative influences that can come on them. And if education has gripped them, they're more likely to stay engaged.
You can't focus wholly on gun crime and drugs and all those things. Yes, they're important, and we need to address them where we can. I think teachers, go to school 8:30 to 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they're not police officers, they're not drug enforcement agents, they're not social workers in that context either. I think the skilled teacher and the committed teacher has got to focus on what they are there to teach. Now, if they can help in some of those areas, then fine, so be it. But they've got to focus on what they're, if they're teaching maths, science, whatever it is, get on with teaching that. That's what the child needs to learn. Let the other agencies, where they can, do their job. You can't do it all. And, that's the reality of the situation. However, when all's said and done, from the role of a parent, as a head teacher and everything else, as bad as it is, you've still got to get those young men to achieve.
Statistics, data still shows you that the experiences of African peoples in the West is still quite unique in terms of being at the bottom of the pile, educationally, socially, politically, and economically. And until those issues are addressed, I don't think we can afford to have this broad spectrum of being what being black is. For many African Caribbean people of African descent, black means one thing: you. And very often you're singled out, and that is the truth. And until we come to that wonderful age when we can forget about skin colour and everything else, where you're judged by your character, not your colour, then we can look at black history in another way.
Now, the work that I've done in relation to black boys, I was part of the REACH committee, which was about raising the aspiration and achievement of black boys and young men. And I was the lead author for that. And I've done lots of work in terms of black boys. But increasingly, I'm coming to the conclusion that it is not a black boy thing, it's a boy thing. If you look at the statistics say that in almost every ethnic group, girls achieve more than boys.
In Birmingham, where we started, the African Caribbean girls are doing twice as well as the boys, and so we just focused on the boys, even though the girls protested, quite vociferously, quite at the outset. We've had to define the word black as we see it. That includes dual heritage boys who have either parent from an African Caribbean background. And that in actual fact is the fastest growing group within the UK. Dual heritage boys of African Caribbean descent. We understand the issues regarding Somali boys, and we have programs working with them as well. We're quite focused on what we call African Caribbean or African Caribbean descent. Now, you may not like it, but that's how it is. And if you're willing to give us the funding, which very few people are, because we say we're very much a voluntary organisation, then that's how we operate.
I mean, literacy is absolutely fundamental. And particularly for boys, the research has shown that. I mean, if they actually get good results in English in literacy, then that's going to take them ahead. At Key Stage 3, for example, they show if you get Key Stage 3 Level 5 in English, then that is the most correlation towards getting a good GCSE in all the subjects. And it goes back to primary school. Literacy, but it's literacy in English, but it's also social literacy, emotional literacy. It's a holistic approach.
I think the approach that Black Boys Can is very positive. The drive to enable young black boys to achieve and to engage in education is clearly sent through.
Make them believe that there is something of benefit for them within education itself. I think if they saw more role models, black teachers, for example, that would certainly help. I'm not saying that's the entire solution. I think having white teachers who care, who can relate to these pupils on a personal, social, emotional level is also very, very important. It's having teachers who care and can understand and connect with the children themselves. I think also further to that, we need to look at the many schools that have done good work over the years. There's lots of good schools out there that have got good practice, exemplary practice that needs to be promoted and shared with the rest of the learning community so that other schools that genuinely want to make a difference can see that differences have been made and that there are strategic approaches out there that do work, have been tried and tested and do work. And thirdly, to challenge perhaps a few schools that don't know how to do it but are indifferent and don't care. Because we have to accept that teacher expectation is a major area that needs to be looked at. That the teachers themselves have got to examine any preconceived notions they may have that are negative towards black pupils. And for schools to be brave enough to challenge themselves to say, right, well, is anything that we may be doing that inadvertently affects those children in an adverse way?
Have you had Black Boys Can in your school?
Not as yet, but I've worked with many community groups in our local area. We've worked with community groups looking at aspiration. We've looked at community groups that are looking at the more sensitive issues like gangs and guns, working with parents, representatives from those groups, because I think it's very important that schools understand their community and work with their community in order to get the right level of aspiration for our children and to have the drive within the school to make a difference.
I believe that there are positive ways in which you can get schools to reflect and change their practice. Black Boys Can has done that as an organisation. It's how you present the case to the school. We have to recognise that schools have got human beings in them. Head teachers are human beings too. They've got feelings. They're going to feel sensitive about certain issues. The emphasis must be on letting schools know that there are other schools out there in similar situations like themselves, dealing with the same challenges that are succeeding in terms of raising aspirations, raising attainment of pupils, and teachers getting a sense of satisfaction out of it. I think if it's approached that way, schools will be less likely to be resistant to the message that you're giving, because what you're saying is, look, we want to help you, we want to help to empower you to make a difference. There's other schools like yourself that have made a difference, so don't just take our word for it. See what those other schools are doing and for us to bring the evidence to them.
You know, we have programmes for white working class boys, Bangladeshi, Pakistani boys and girls. We have links, very, very successful links with universities up and down the country. I've had, and my colleagues have had the issue of, do we change the name Black Boys Can? And in one sense, yeah, we could make it more inclusive. We call it something like Education First or something, you know. But the problem is, black boys identify with it. You know, it does what it says on the tin. I'll take the risk, if you don't mind. I will take the risk that I will put it with the criticism of the name of the organisation. I'll put it with the fact that people sort of say we're single issue fanatics if we get the results that we want. And we've been successful so far, and we see no reason why we should stop.
I have to be conscious in the school that I serve that we have a diverse community, and that it is important that diversity is celebrated and the histories and traditions of all of the cultural groups, ethnic groups within the school are acknowledged.
When I was recently in Jamaica, I noticed that the African Caribbean boys there had a respect for education, but again, they had to deal with a lot of social problems that sort of militated against them wanting to aspire to greatness. And a couple of schools came up with some very interesting, innovative ideas. One particular school, they had a male emphasis day, where the onus was on the fathers or male carers to come into school and to work with the teachers and the pupils doing workshops, etc. And this particular school had run it for 4 years and did extremely well. And as a result, talking to the young boys, their aspirations were raised in terms of seeing there being a possibility of actually gaining a better life because of education itself.
I would like to see young Afro-Caribbean boys doing, which I believe they're doing in my school now, achieving as well as anybody else and being as aspirant as anybody else within the school community and the community at large.
I think the idea of graduations now that's been adopted in schools is a very, very good idea because children get a sense of moving from one step to the other, gaining greater responsibility and trust by society to believe in themselves and become more confident and competent citizens. All that's important. So there's a whole range of things. And I think we in education, if we're serious about dealing with the issue, we have to look at it all around, all the different causes. I think the attitude of the young people is part of it. But I do feel that every subsequent generation of young people fail partly because of what the previous generation didn't do for them.
My wish for the future is that the current number of many, many black boys and young men that I see that are achieving will be increased. And that even whilst we talk about role models, just as Gilroy is mentioning things like pointing to schools that are doing extremely well, we could perhaps in primary schools and secondary schools, please put in a much more prominent position those black boys and young men that continue to do well on a daily basis.
Once they achieve it, then there's no role for you anymore as black boys, is there?
Fantastic. We'll willingly give up what we're doing if that's the goal is achieved. We're not trying to sort of exist. We came into being because there was a problem. But as soon as the problem goes away, the better, I'll learn to play golf. If I can get into the club, if they let me in. But anyway, that's a whole other issue.